a Member of Parliament for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke, I welcome this rare opportunity to actually participate in a parliamentary debate ever since democracy was shut down by this government. The legislation before us today, Bill C-20, consists of several random diversionary payouts and other changes that more properly should have been having extensive examination in a parliamentary committee before being passed into law. I support helping get Canadians who are struggling with the unprecedented events of our time, like the COVID-19 pandemic. I do not support the transfer of large amounts of taxpayer dollars to organizations that personally benefit family members of Liberal MPs. The decision to accept an unconfirmed, unsolicited proposal from a non-registered lobbyist who represents an organization that had members of the Prime Minister's family on their payroll and perhaps others with close association to the Liberal Party to the amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars is a level of corruption beyond the comprehension of most Canadians. When the Canada Student Service Grant was announced, We Charity was not in the announcement. Even after sordid detail was revealed, the Prime Minister defended his ethical lapse in the same way he responded to groping a female reporter and dressing up in blackface. He repeatedly lied, deny, deny, deny. He could get away with that in a neutered media. The floor of the House of Commons, however, is another matter. The amount of money in the We Charity scandal is staggering. Almost $1 billion. What reasonable Canadians fear is this revelation of payments to individuals directly associated with the Liberal Party is the tip of the iceberg. There's a reason this Prime Minister is hiding from Canadians by not facing Parliament, conveniently taking a so-called vacation day, a wee day. The Prime Minister likes his daily cuckoo clock appearances where he can avoid actual questions. Awarding an unsolicited contract with no fair competitive tendering process should require resignations. The fact that the contract was awarded to an organization with family members of Liberal MPs on the payroll is indefensible. Let's look at where the millions in administration fees was going until somebody pulled the plug, waiting for the heat to die down. We Charity has been effectively described as operating like a cult. First was their scheme to pay for volunteer labor. Next was a plan to pay students for volunteer labor at below minimum wage. That proposal raised a few eyebrows, except now we've learned this is how the We organization operated their various companies, with naive, idealistic young people put on a salary, then being required to work 60 to 70 hours a week. The salary was calculated at a normal 37.5-hour week, so effectively the We Charity found a loophole to get around provincial minimum wage laws. With the backing of the federal government, We Charity figured it found another loophole to avoid minimum wage laws. If the young person complained, they were shamed into accepting workplace conditions by being reminded that the school children who donated their pennies, nickels, and dimes to the We Charity expected all the money to go to help underprivileged children in Africa. Little did those school children know their pennies were being collected to buy commercial real estate in downtown Toronto and to pay fat speaking fees to family members of Liberal MPs. This is what happens when Parliament is shut down and you have people with no ethics or scruples in charge. There's a total lack of accountability. Now, let's look more closely at the legislation before us today. Of the measures contained in Bill C-20, I'm particularly interested in measures that support Canadians living with disabilities. Bill C-20 proposes to direct a payment to individuals who qualify for the disability tax credit. 7 years ago, I introduced a private member's bill, C 462, an act restricting the fees charged by promoters of the disability tax credit. My intention for bringing that legislation before Parliament was straightforward. I wanted to see increased protection for disabled Canadians from the predatory practices of certain individuals who refer to themselves as disability tax credit promoters. They see the tax credit as an opportunity to profit on the reduced circumstances of others. The disability tax credit is a non-refundable tax credit that reduces the amount of income tax that either individuals living with disabilities or their supporting persons have to pay. Parliament voted in this tax credit with the recognition that Canadians with disabilities face extra financial challenges. Bill C-20 proposes payments of up to $600 for Canadians living with disabilities. My constituents question whether the reason for the lump sum payment contained in Bill C-20 can be accepted at face value, or whether it's a taxpayer inducement to get Canadians to forget about the WE charity corruption scandal. When I found out that some individuals were being charged 20, 30, or much as 40% of the tax credit, I felt, and I thought Liberal members of Parliament agreed, those kinds of charges were unfair. This was especially true when we consider that the purpose of the disability tax credit is to support Canadians living with serious disabilities. As a member of Parliament, which includes Garrison Petawawa, I'm acutely aware of the number of Canadians living with disabilities who are in my riding. The soldiers and veterans of my community are at a greater risk for a number of disabilities because of the sacrifices they have made for our country. The tax credit is of special importance to them. In bringing forth Bill 462, I also wanted my constituents to know, and all Canadians, that they can access their local member of Parliament regarding any federal tax credit without being charged a percentage of the tax credit. 7 years ago, my private member's legislation to help disabled Canadians received the unanimous support of that Parliament. Even the current Prime Minister, who at that time was an opposition MP on the WE Charity Speaker Circuit, voted to support my legislation. So what happened? There was an unfortunate change in government. Canadians are still waiting for the regulations for that legislation to be enacted. So why the delay? The change of government brought the usual Liberal hangers-on, the lobbyists who look for ways to game the system at the expense of other Canadians. Liberal lobbyists derailed protections for disabled Canadians with the full support of the Prime Minister and his party. Disabled Canadians are some of the most vulnerable in our society. With all the money the federal government is shoveling out the door, like today's legislation and the WE charity scandal, and without the proper scrutiny of Parliament, money intended to help Canadians goes elsewhere. These same disability tax consultants saw a big payday when the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, CERB, was introduced. One such consultancy started offering a service that charges clients a fee of $160 to assist them with their CERB application. This is what you could read on their website. Quote, "We have no upfront fee. You pay us only when you get your CERB payment. Due to these rough times, Canada Tax Reviews has reduced our fee from 33% to an 8% fee for this program." End of quote. Every 4 weeks, those who still have not found jobs have to reapply for CERB. Each time a person uses that tax consultant to apply for CERB, as fees vary, $160 is charged. That's a payday of almost $1,000 to a tax consultant from somebody who collects the full CERB. Someone collecting the full CERB who could have used that money to pay rent or to put food on the table. If the government audits a taxpayer and finds they did not qualify for CERB, they'll be required to pay back the full amount, including any fees paid to tax consultants. If the government had carried through with the will of Parliament and implemented Bill 462, an act restricting the fees charged by promoters of the disability tax credit, the abuses happening today would not be happening. Bill C-20 needs to go before a parliamentary committee the same way the sweetheart $912 million Canadian student service grant contract to Liberal insiders should have. Canadians deserve no less. Last time I looked, Canada was still a democracy. It's time Canada started acting like one.
Des commentaires, questions and comments? No, okay. The Honourable Member for Innisfil.
There he is. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, thank you to the Honourable Member for laying it out honestly, what's going on around here. One thing she failed to mention, how much of a role do you think Cheryl Butts is playing in all of what's going on right now?
The Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Well, Madam Speaker, this scandal, like so many we saw in the government before this one that Gerald Butts participated in, the Wynne government, McGuinty government, we're seeing all the same types of scandals going on. They pay Liberal insiders large amounts of money for contracts. Canadians, and in Ontario, it was the hydro consumers who ended up paying inflated electricity fees and the money went directly from the consumers' pockets to the big Liberal supporters who got these contracts for the wind turbines and solar farms. So we're seeing Gerald Butts' fingerprints all over what the scandals that are ongoing today.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for her speech. What I recalled is that she spoke about persons living with disabilities. She seems to care about this issue, but last month we at the Bloc proposed dividing Bill C-17 so that there could be a separate bill